I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, I've seen jiu-jitsu, but those guys are amazing.
Great honor to have the Machado brothers.
Machado.
It's Carlos Machado.
This episode is sponsored by Stay Humble Coffee. Coffee is so good, it doesn't need to brag. Find it at stayhumblecoffee.com. Here we are again, coffee time with Carlos Machado. And I'm having the pleasure to have as our guest today, Mrs. Jenna Quinn. And we have a lot to talk about. And I'm going to review to you who she is now, what her journey has been, and the amazing message that he has for quite a few. So if you are a young adult, if you are a parent, if you are somebody at any stage in your life, please hear dearly what we're about to talk about, okay? So let's start with you, Miss Jenna. Who is Miss Jenna today? What have you been doing? Last time I tried to find out where you were all over town. You're going to one state here, another state there, and I want to hear what's up with you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Carlos, for having me on. I know we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours here on some really important psychological concepts. And I'm grateful for your fighting spirit. I can resonate with that myself personally through overcoming adversity myself. And yeah, I'm grateful. I've been to most states, so I'm very grateful that I've been able to go to large towns and small towns.
Really?
Yes, and very recently I was in Washington D.C. Just last month because the Jenna Quinn Law, which bears my name, is federal legislation now. So couldn't be more grateful to be alive and to be able to testify that there is federal legislation that is called the Jenna Quinn Law in Washington, D.C. that we have now.
Wow.
That helps protect children and youth from predators.
That's amazing. So you brought that up, and I'm sure some of the viewers who might have heard of you and are acquainted with the law, they know what it is. But if you don't mind, give the viewers some feedback, the scope of the law, what it advocates, how it works, and what has happened since it was instituted.
Yes. So it bears my name because I'm a survivor. And going back to 2009, even before that, in 2007, I met who is now one of our amazing senators here in Texas, Senator Tian Parker. And at the time, he was a representative, and I helped give a tour at the Children's Advocacy Center that I received victim services at. And he was with his lovely wife there, and I just explained my story to him. I told him what would have helped, the education, the awareness, if someone was available, if these things were available for me, it would have been easier for me to tell. And I'm very grateful he took that to heart and passed Jenna's Law, which was the first of its kind in the whole country. And so what this did in Texas is it set the standard of care now for child safety for other states. So it requires child sexual abuse specifically, education, training, and awareness for teachers, which are mandatory reporters, and they make up most of their reports, and also students. Student safety, body awareness. Stranger danger is very real, and we always have to talk about the reality of strangers. But unfortunately, when we look at research, it shows that it's more acquaintance danger. Over 93% of the time, a child or youth is actually sexually abused by someone they know, someone they trust, and sometimes it's even someone that they love because that person has worked to gain their trust, has worked to gain an emotional connection with them, has worked to gain some sort of dependence, on that victim. So stranger danger is important. I grew up with stranger danger. Most of us grew up with that. But unfortunately, that's not what empirical research shows. We have to teach awareness.
Yes.
And we have to teach acquaintance danger. And what does, grooming, red flag grooming indicators look like? Because most of our enemies will hide in plain sight.
We mentioned briefly before we started about wolves in sheep's skin.
Mhm.
A lot of times, many people get blindsided because they always make, like you said, assumptions that if somebody harms your kid, you never be assumed is somebody from within the circle in which the family is comfortable with. And that's why a lot of times it's so hard to detect. And I always wonder in situations like that, because I know you have two aspects with this law: the preventative, which ideally should be the case. Don't fall prey to it because you're educated to see the signs before it happens, and the healing one, for those who are aware of the signs or warning signs if something like that was to take place. Um, I always wish that we could anticipate and avoid. And my question now, and we're going to go back to the Jenna Law. I have some more questions with that, but I'm here intrigued by how can you uh, make more likely to prevent than instead mitigate the effect of it in case you were not able to avoid altogether. How your advocacy and the educational process, based on your experience, splits between those two: prevent, anticipate, don't happen, and if it does, heal. Deal with it, review and heal. So I like what kind of parallel we can make out of that one.
Yeah, and there's different depths and there's different levels. So you have primary prevention, which means there was a close call, but it never got to any form of contact or non-contact abuse, right? So you have primary prevention, and then you have, actual intervention where you say there was grooming that started to happen, but somewhere in that grooming cycle, there was awareness and the grooming cycle was interrupted. So it's not full on prevention because some grooming already took place, but it didn't advance any further, right? But then if it does advance, like you said, to contact sexual abuse, well, then now there's intervention needed. Now there's a report that needs to be made. And then now there's healing and counseling that needs to happen. But what's interesting enough, if you look at the research, it shows that the mental health impact from the psychological grooming and the spiritual grooming that a lot of these offenders will do is actually just as devastating as if there's a physical sexual assault.
Right.
And that's because of the type of grooming that happens, right? So the research actually showed that just one grooming incident alone was enough to keep the child or the youth in fear, enough to paralyze them, enough to make them feel like they're too ashamed to say something, that a grooming episode has happened. And so that just speaks to the depths of how that affects that
Yeah.
person as a whole, right?
Hmm.
So now we can see that there's something much deeper happening here.
Hmm.
Um, it's not as natural of an occurrence as you would think. It's not strictly physical. There's grooming, there's psychological and physical, and especially spiritual grooming that happens where it impacts the body, the soul, and the spirit, not just the body. And that alone is enough to make a survivor feel paralyzed through fear and intimidation. And predators know that. And that's why they look for vulnerabilities. It's really interesting. If you look at the way that offender research shows the way that a sexual predator will groom, and if you also go through scriptures and you look at the way that our enemy, the adversary, if you look at the way Satan grooms, they're actually mirrored. They are very identical, and it's predatorial strategy, right? And so that's why you mentioned wolves in sheep's clothing. And we get that from the life and words of Jesus himself. So we get this term and we get this from Jesus because he told us it's not an option to be naive or not.
Hmm.
If you look at what he said, beware, right? Many will come professing one thing, but inwardly there are ravenous wolves. Inwardly, there's an appetite for something that is abnormal. Inwardly, there's a ravenous appetite for something else. And when you look at predators and when you look at the wolf, it's interesting that he chose the wolf. The wolf is an apex predator, which means they're the best hunter, right, for their territory. And it's because they're patient. They will watch, they will wait for weeks, they'll follow a flock of sheep. Well, sexual predators will groom for weeks. They will wait for weeks to study their target so that they will identify a target. I always tell victims, you were picked, you were identified, and you were picked because of whatever reason. And they hunt, they strategize, they premeditate, they calculate on what are the right things to say to this person, what kind of commonality can I establish, can I fill an emotional need, can I come in and meet a situation for them, can I be a figurative role for them of some sort. And so they are looking for vulnerabilities and ways that they can develop some sort of trust with the victim.
Yeah. Do me a favor if you don't mind. I'm not sure if this moved. Keep in the direction of your face, the mic. Yeah. It
Oh,
can be wherever you want. Just make sure you turn. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
okay.
Okay, so let's go back to the Jenna, and we're gonna go into the profiling and the way you assess uh, what kind of people. Because a lot of times, if you see psychopathic, sociopathic behavior, or people that have erratic behavior, criminal behavior, um, there's certain, and I'm not trying here to put in a bottle, certain types that are more inclined, or it falls more the stats on certain categories. Let's say a teacher and a student, a stepdad and a stepkid,
Mhm.
a best friend, and the offsprings of the best friend's best friend. So if you were to, I just want to pick on that. What would you see based on your experience has been the most pervasive? If there's one that happens more often than not, or is just a blend? How does that? How would you say? I'm not sure if that's too complicated.
It's interesting. Predators come from all different types of walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. Every time you see, an operation sting, and you see, recently there's, 50 people arrested in a child sex trafficking ring. You look at all of these mugshots and you look at these profiles, and they're people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So you have people that are teachers, people that were pastors, you have people that even were law enforcement members themselves.
Mm.
I mean, there's all different types of walks of life. And so it's really hard to pick a certain prototype. But a lot of research has shown that most predators actually have families of their own. Many of them are parents, believe it or not. And so that's what makes this crime really tricky, because it's not who you would think many times, because it's a hidden crime. It's not a visible crime. It happens in the secret. It happens behind closed doors. And so it's not always easy to identify. So much of the research shows that many predators are educated and they have families of their own. And something else that's really interesting is one piece of research showed that about 93% of sex offenders actually claim to be religious. And part of that is because they use religion as a cover. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? It's the perfect place to remain unsuspecting. And if you look at offender research studies, and this just goes for all faith-based backgrounds or any community of faith, it shows offender quotes. And I use this in my presentations when I train law enforcement and mandatory reporters. Much of what these offenders will tell you from their own mouths is that they find generally people of faith easier to fool. And that's hard to hear because I'm a person of faith. And the reason for that is because they exploit and they take advantage of the best qualities that faith-based religions have to offer. So love and grace and forgiveness and things like that. And so it's the perfect place to hide. It's the perfect place to cover. That's why, they learn, I know how to look like a sheep. I know how to talk like a sheep. I know how to act like a sheep. I know what sheep like. And so they can hide with the sheep but inwardly there's a ravenous appetite for something else. And so I think that's one of the most shocking pieces of research that we see about predators is that they find the right places to remain unsuspecting. One of my favorite books, you've probably read it, is The Art of War.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. It said the best way to carry out your battle strategy is to carry out destructive acts while at the same time remaining undetected.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what these predators are really good at. They're able to sexually abuse not once, but twice for many times. And often they'll have multiple victims because they're so good at what they do. They're so good at being predators that, they can have, your average predator has 7 to 9 victims. And then you have your serial predators, which have made the news, your Sanduskies and your Larry Nassars that have hundreds of victims, right? And it's like, how can they do this? How can hundreds of girls, athletes with self-confidence, and how can all of these women remain silent for so many years? Well, I can tell you how. It's because we're going to get to that.
Yep.
I can tell you exactly how, and it's not very hard to do if you don't know if you're not aware. Awareness is how you win.
Yeah, I tell you what. One of the things here that I'm intrigued as well is, when did the Jenna Law became an idea? It's because I know that I love that victor and not a victim. And I know that this is one of the testaments to that example. How in the world? Was that you that came up with that? Did somebody suggest you? Was that a natural consequence of your work once you start to heal and then you wanted to actually help others that might have had the same issue?
I never in the world ever imagined I would end up helping other survivors. I never in the world imagined I would have legislation in my name. It's not really something I set my intentions on doing, to be very honest. It's something that really happened organically. And there was a real pivotal moment that happened with me after the police report was made. I went to have a SANE exam, which is a sexual assault nurse exam. And, for many years, my parents did the best they could with the knowledge and information that they had, which was not much at the time on this subject. And they spent a lot of time and money trying to figure out what was wrong with their daughter. I had changed. I had all the classical symptoms of victimization. And, they took me to doctors to get tested for all types of, different disorders and mental health and things like that. And, these people were not trained on, what to look for. And so, unfortunately, most of it was under everyone's radar, even professionals. And I was having my exam, and she sat in the waiting room and she picked up a tiny little pamphlet, an educational pamphlet that said, warning signs a child may display if they've been sexually abused. And she got out a pen from her purse and she started to check off over 80% of those warning signs and symptoms that I had displayed for years. And I was all summed up on one tiny little page of bullet points, and she couldn't believe it. First of all, as a mom, she'd never seen this information. And then also as a teacher, she was a career teacher. And she thought, how many of my own students have gone through my own classroom and I didn't see these signs? They were diagnosed as something else, as depressed or oppositional defiant, right? Because oftentimes it goes misdiagnosed. The inner root is really trauma, and what you're labeling is a symptom of the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all very clear that, my gosh, there's not enough information out there. Information can literally save your life. It's a matter of life or death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for lack of knowledge, people can perish. What you don't know can literally kill you. And that's what we have seen with this crime specifically, and the way these predators work. That was the first time where we really saw we've got to do more. We've got to do something about the fact that there is no information about the way there is no. If I had had the opportunity to tell, because I concluded for me, this was not a conversation for my generation or the generations before me. This was not a conversation. There wasn't body safety conversations in any of my safe places. So my parents didn't have body conversation with me. My church didn't have a body conversation with me. My school never had, and I went to a private school. And this is where I first met evil. And the problem is that none of my safe places found it important enough to give me a body safety conversation and these safety skills on identifying these grooming tactics in an age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate way. And so that's essentially what Jenna's Law is, because we have seen now the success rate on when there is education, there is primary prevention, and there is intervention.
Yeah.
So that's the good news, is that the education does work.
I tell you what, it brings me to mind like street smart
Yeah.
sometimes. Like I can tell you, like even when I was a kid, and even after I had kids, I never drunk from anybody else's cup. I'm not a drinker, but if somebody offered me a drink from an open bottle or a cup, I wouldn't take it. I always wanted to have, and my kids, that's one of the things I emphasized the most as they grew of age and they start to go out and interact with their, friends, in parties or whatever.
Yeah.
I said, make sure, you keep track of where you are. All right. So let's talk about a bit of to the degree that you feel comfortable with, the storytelling aspect, in the sense that when you overcome your pain and your trauma, it's already an ordeal in itself. It's a journey that you gain the maturity, the experience that eventually you feel strong enough to share with others. But when you have to revisit the experiences by accounts of others that come to you to share the painful experiences, it's almost like one of those things. If you're a hero, one of the traits of a hero, which I consider you one, is they internally they bleed every time they witness and share the suffering of others that they are trying to rescue and help. So how much that affects you, if you have a strategy how to deal with it, and I'm sure your faith and everything else that you do in terms of healing yourself will be there for that occasion. How do you cope with that? And if there's any story or stories that you want to share, that people that came to you and eventually you saw them at another time, and the progress that took place, whichever there was, through the work that you do.
I think those are amazing questions with a lot of insight, because, there's a lot of truth to that. And, regardless of if you have had trauma in your background or not, I think that hearing about a child or youth that has experienced the horrors of being sexually abused and groomed, that's hard to hear regardless, right? I mean, even when we talk about this to the general public and we do our trainings, no matter what, it can sometimes provoke a sense of shame in both speaker and listener, just because of the nature of the topic that is being discussed. But that alone should just show you how malevolent this crime is. The fact that nobody wants to talk about it, it just shows you how deeply demonic it is, right? The fact that people want to shut down, that they don't want to hear about it, they don't want to address it, they don't want to confront it.
Tell me about it. Do you see a bias in the media covering this? Do you feel like they always try to push under the rug a little bit when it comes to that kind of topic?
I think that institutions are really some of the worst when it comes to brushing it under the rug, denying a survivor's experience, silencing a survivor. Some institutions will make survivors sign non-disclosure agreements. And it's because they care about their own institution. They care about the way they look to the American people. They care about themselves more than they care about the well-being and the safety of the child or the youth. And so that just goes to show, child protection is very simple. It's not complicated. It's not complicated at all. Do you value the child or youth's best interest, or do you value your own interests over the child's interests? And so, what we've seen with this crime specifically is that fear will grip people stronger than the truth that's behind hope in addressing this.
You mentioned child protection. I kind of like, you just crossed my mind here. When you have services like that in charge of child protection, what's the prevalence of this type of crime in foster homes? Do you have any stats on that, or?
Foster homes, there's trauma regardless many times in their background, and that's what makes them, foster children for some reason or another. Because of their background, they need to be fostered. But abuse is very high. Regardless whether it's neglect or verbal abuse or physical abuse. Unfortunately, there's a lot of childhood trauma, when you look at foster. But as far as overall prevalence, research is mixed because it's hard to really know with disclosure rates being what they are. But essentially, historically in the past, research has shown 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18, and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. So it is a prevalent problem, and I am hopeful, and I do believe that now, more than any other year or any other generation, there's a greater hope in awareness and shedding light on this specific crime, because this crime is allowed to thrive in silence. Predators are counting on people to be cowards. Predators are counting on people to be silent and to shrink back in fear and to say, well, not this person, or Pastor so-and-so would never do that, or this person would never do that, or there's no way this person could be a predator. And so if a victim does come forward, they're shut down. Guarantee you there's someone listening now that has probably tried to report or probably tried to tell in their life, and they were likely shut down by someone.
So you mentioned a ratio here, 1 every 6 for boys, and you said 1 in 12 for girls?
1 in 3 for girls.
1 in 3 for girls, double. Okay, what is the stats? Because I know I saw one interview that you had a while back in which there was a point that caught my eyes. What was the stats officially, and what was the likely stats of unreported accounts that were not official then? Okay, so what's the scenario nowadays? For instance, I thought I heard the number 42 million Americans have been affected by this crime, and then there's no telling how many more. Do you have a picture so people have an idea of the scope of this thing?
Yeah, there's comparisons and are helpful for people. So it is estimated. Again, a lot of these are estimations because not everyone reports, not everyone tells, and unfortunately, some people go to the grave with this pain. So estimated is 42 million survivors in just in America alone, just in our great country, just in the United States. And comparison, like this is about 2 times the amount of Americans living with cancer. So it is a problem. It's massive. It's so massive, and it's to a degree getting more massive because of its online presence.
Yeah. That's another problem in itself.
That's
right?
a whole nother problem.
Predators, they can operate anonymously. They don't even reveal themselves until...
Right.
Wow.
They can cover, they can really cover, and they can really pretend to be someone that they're not, and they can really establish a relationship. And if you talk to, different ICAC members, Internet Crimes Against Children Division, I've had the great honor of training lots of different ICAC members, and they will tell you that it's really not very difficult. It's not very hard to groom a child or a youth online. You just get into social media, or you get into gaming for young boys. You get into, whatever computer program they're wanting to do, or social media app that they're using. You get into that, and then you find a vulnerability. you start liking, you start commenting, and you pick out the ones that have the lowest self-esteem, the ones that need to be told they're beautiful, the ones that need to be told. And what research actually shows on young youth, on young girls, it's quite sad. The two things that work on young girls is, number one, telling them that they're beautiful, and number two, telling them, I love you. Because I think a lot of young girls are not hearing these two things within their own homes.
Yeah.
Or if they are hearing it, they don't believe it. And so what's happening where it's that easy to compliment a young girl and develop a relationship with her online, where now you've got her and now you can ask for photos and request, well, you said you loved me, so why don't you just take a photo of yourself and send it? And so it's unfortunately out of control online.
Yeah. What is the level of effective prosecution in the cases that are revealed with because you had 42 million, let's say the estimate on officially on the number of survivors. Out of that, how many instances the perpetrators pay the price of legal action?
So this is troubling where we're going to go here. This is very troubling research. Nationally, statistically, less than 10% of offenders are ever actually apprehended. It's because there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, victims are afraid to report. And if they do report, many times it's delayed. So they don't tell the first time, they tell maybe a year or two later, which is normal. And when you look at disclosure process, one research study suggested that it can take a victim a lifetime to really remember all of the things that all the trauma that they went through. So there's the fear of reporting. And then you also have predators are really good at what they do. So they know how to silence, they know how to fear, they know how to go off the radar. And when you look at serial predators and their timing for when to strike, they don't always strike. They know when to strike and they know when to back off. So they may strike, and if they think the victim is getting close to reporting, they'll back off for weeks. They may back off for months. And that's where for me personally, a lot of my post-traumatic stress came in, because it happened not once, but for many years. And it happened for many years because I thought it was over many times. Because I think, I never know if I'm in a situation where I'm safe or I'm going to be attacked. Because sometimes our family would be with this person and I'm safe. So sometimes I'm safe and sometimes I'm not safe. That's really difficult for the mind of a young child to know, I don't know when I'm ever going to be safe. So the thing is that these predators really know when to strike and when to back off.
Gotcha. Now, and I'm sure it may have happened. A lot of times you see different states, they take a lighter approach to how they deal with criminals, and not only different crimes, but in particular this, because you see cases of rape victims that the perpetrator is caught, goes to jail, and then, is released after a while.
Yes.
How that translates or relates to the sexual abuse victim when actually there is a report, and how effective the legal system handles the situation from then on, or if it varies the way you have seen on occasion.
It varies greatly. It depends on your state. It depends on your courts. It depends on if your case gets taken up or if your case gets no-billed. It's a very difficult process to navigate, to be on that side of victim services. And so all the more reason why I feel extremely grateful, and I have so much gratitude for the fact that I was able to receive justice. And this predator did go to prison for a very long time. And I didn't realize at the time this was not normal. I didn't realize, at 16 years old when I finally reported and he was sent to prison, I knew it was a big deal. But then coming out of this and being in victim advocacy, now I see how difficult it actually is to prosecute, because these predators, they know how to keep their victims silent. And because delayed disclosure is normal, it can be difficult to have evidence.
Yeah, I have one thing now. Let's go deep onto the predators now. Okay, who are the predators? What kind of skin they wear, and what are the main warning signs?
That's an excellent question. A predator can be anyone,
Mhm.
literally anybody, and that's not an exaggeration. I've heard, stories, and I've counseled with survivors where the predator is, you name it, and that's the predator. Predators can be grandparents. Predators can be biological parents. Predators can be, actually, if you look at trafficking, familial trafficking is the most common form of trafficking. Trafficking victims are trafficked most likely by their own parents, by their own family.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
It's so hard. It's so hard because for decades and decades we heard about stranger danger, and this is the new the new message is acquaintance danger. And how hard is that when you talk about how deep the roots of betrayal run for survivors, right? And that's what makes it even more difficult to tell. It is much, I don't want to say it's easier because it's not easier. It's just as difficult to tell if you're attacked by a stranger, but there is a different dynamic of reporting. If it's a stranger that breaks into my car or steals my purse, I'm going to pick up the phone right away and I'm going to call 911 and I'm going to say, this happened, arrest this person, because there's no strings attached. Nobody else knows this person either. But when you enter into the realm of acquaintance or relationship or community, if this person was in the community, well, now I have to think about what are other people going to think about this person, because other people know this person too. And it makes it a much more interesting dynamic, way more challenging for children or youth to tell. So predators hide behind PhDs. They hide behind, medical degrees. They hide behind all sorts of different titles. And they can really be anyone because it is a hidden crime. And so that's why the awareness of understanding red flag grooming indicators is very important.
Yeah, you talk about families, you see countries that often, not necessarily even sex abuse, they prostitute their children to make whatever income out of them. It's just like, it's a rabbit hole that when you go there, it's almost like a movie that you see the light in the dark. But when you look at the dark, it gets really dark. It's kind of like, I remember Nicolas Cage had a movie called 8 Millimeters. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. He was a cop that investigated snuff crime. And he had to actually watch the footage. I do have law enforcement agents that are in charge of protecting children, and they have to be exposed and witness the content of the evidence before they catch the criminals. And it's really mind-shattering because as a human, it's almost like I don't want to even look at that. But from the role that they play, in order for them to prosecute, incriminate, and arrest, they have to go through those steps that put them in that situation. And some of them actually, they have severe mental issues because they get so appalled and revolted and stuff. So it goes down to now, have you seen other stories of the survivors you come across, reports going unnoticed? I'll give an example here. I've heard accounts sometimes, or even mothers that heard the daughter, let's say, talk that the stepdad did something, and the mother sided with the stepdad and never took the daughter's account, kind of, like you said, brushed under the rug. How prevalent are those kind of stories?
Unfortunately, those stories are very prevalent, and the people that are meant to be caring for children are the people that are harming them. And so, for example, there was a young girl in Texas who, from the age of 7 to 9, this is a real life story, from the age of 7 to 9, she was sexually abused by her stepdad. And her biological mom, at one point, even walked in on what was happening. And she glanced at it, turned around, shut the door, and walked out and didn't say a word. Didn't say a word. And so what do you think this young girl is going to do? Do you think she's going to tell anyone if my own mom saw this and agrees and complies that it's not a problem?
Isn't that a crime when you witness a crime and you?
It is. So fast forward, the school nurse ended up going through a Jenna's Law training where she learned about indicators and warning signs a child may display if they've been sexually abused. And so the young girl was able to make a report because the nurse identified what was happening to this little girl, because she would go into the school nurse because she wasn't feeling well. So the nurse went through the training and said, it's exactly what happened to me. I saw my school nurse. I often had headaches and couldn't sleep. And, when you don't sleep and you have trauma, your body will store that. Your body remembers and it can't cope. So the school nurse was able to make a report, and thank goodness the stepdad was charged. He was a very affluent person, owned a bank, and so they had money. And he was charged, and then the mom was also charged with a Class C misdemeanor. And this is the problem. Failure to report is criminal, and you will be charged if you suspect or you flat out know. So if there's a report made and a child or youth comes back and says, well, I told this person, or this person walked in on it, or this person suspected, that's on you, and you will be charged. And so I think people overlooked the fact that when mandatory reporters, I show teachers mugshots all the time in my trainings, simply to show that you can't dismiss a suspicion. If you suspect, then it's probably for a reason. And so why on earth would you overlook a suspicion? Better to be wrong than to let something like this go. Yeah. And fail to protect a child or a youth. So they were both charged. And here's a good story. This little girl, what she told the social worker, actually her favorite part of all of this was she thanked her social worker and she said, I finally got a good night's sleep, because he was coming into her room at night. So she was just grateful that she could finally sleep, lay her head down on her pillow and sleep with peace of mind, knowing that a monster wasn't going to come in at some point in the middle of the night.
It brings me to mind, not to try to bring celebs into the discussion, but Woody Allen and Faye Dunaway, their story, and I'm not sure if you're acquainted with it. And I don't know the intricacies of it, but apparently, there were some issues there. And they had adopted kids for the most part, just like. This episode is brought to you by Machado Method Nutrition, premium fuel for disciplined athletes who train with intent and recover with purpose. Live the method. Fuel the life. Start now at machadomethodnutrition.com. Yeah, okay, so I'm intrigued by the advocacy part, because we're going here into the coping and healing system. And I think the challenge is you have these different steps. You have, you feel shame, you feel fear, you're afraid of the consequences. You don't want to be. You feel like if you reveal, you're getting exposed. You feel you're part of the problem instead of being the victim, of the situation. How critical, and I know you have other elements that I'd like to elaborate. How critical was to meet somebody at the advocacy group that you went to, with the nurse and everything? What kind of approach they had, the educational aspect that your mom came across the manuals and is like, oh my gosh, I could have, she checked the list of everything that was matching the description of your symptoms, your behavior through the time that you experienced your trauma. it's kind of like a how-to manual of some sort. So you have like on a descriptive manner. Okay, this is the deal. You if you're a victim, you can still be a victor, which is what happened to you. You know what I'm saying? Victim is no longer part of the equation. But there's the formula here. You're gonna have to follow through these steps. Like everything, like AA gives the 12 steps for people to recover substance abuse, and So how does that work? I'm kind of more intrigued because I'd like people who listen to this. Listen, it's not the end of the journey. It's not the end of the road. If you are in this situation, this is it. Find a place like this. This is the how-to that you're gonna have to kind of. What are the main things you can call upon to kind of make people understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel?
Absolutely. There's always light and there's always hope. And, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it, right? We do not have to succumb to pain. You don't have to allow pain to change you. You don't have to allow pain to identify you. You don't have to allow pain to prophesy for you in your life, right? I mean, that's called taking back power. You take back control of your mind, of your voice, your ability to express yourself, your ability to identify your own needs. And it's a process and it does take time, but it starts with, making the decision to say, I don't want to live with my pain anymore. I don't want to live in a victim mindset anymore. And for me, I received counseling services from the Children's Advocacy Center. And so it is really important to have someone, whether it's an organization or a person, that can, number one, this is the most important thing, validate your experience. Because if you go to someone and you tell them about what happened to you and they don't validate it, then that's re-victimizing you. And this happens a lot when a report is made or someone goes to tell someone and they're like, oh, well, it must not have been that bad, or that didn't really happen, or that person would never do something like that, right? So these advocacy centers, one of the most important things that they do is they validate your experience. They validate your pain. If I come to you and I tell you about an experience that I had and you don't validate it, I'm going to start to think I'm crazy, right? So validation, if you look a layer deeper at what these advocacy centers actually do, is you validate someone's experience. And the way that happens is, number one, the inner work that has to happen is we have to be honest. So it's an internal battle first of denial versus honesty. Because honesty is hard. Honesty is not for the faint of heart. In order to truly move forward or get better, you have to be honest. This is where I'm at right now, and it sucks. This is where I'm at, and this is the pain that I'm in, but I'm not going to stay this way. I'm going to move forward, and here's how I'm going to move forward. So we have to be honest about our experiences, and not just the experiences, but the effect that it had on you. Because that's a whole nother beast right there. Number one, the abuse happened. Number two, it's damaged me. These are very powerful things to say. It's damaged my mind. It's damaged the way I think. It's damaged me. There's a spiritual impact. Other than, yes, there's damage to the body, but there's internal damage too. And so if we can be honest and say it happened, we can be honest about the effects, because this is where we have to battle our pride. And the pride says, oh, I'm fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. And so then you move into denial, suppression, and minimization, which is very dangerous territory. That's where pain hangs out. Pain stays when we don't address it. We can suppress and we can minimize. And to a degree, that's healthy for survival. But at some point, you have to be fully honest about the experience and find someone who can help you with that.
It's like the monster that lurks into the dark. It's dormant. You're never rid of it. It's still there. It's just, and it's subtle, the effects, like you said. You had physical manifestations. You said you had the hives, you had headaches. A lot of times your body's telling you something.
Yeah.
And that brings to me, so they had the validation. You have somebody that you feel you can trust and actually is listening to you.
Yes.
Right? But then you have, okay, so from here on, what's the next stage on the healing?
Yeah, so it's really important then to identify where you are, and then decide that you don't want to stay there. Because believe it or not, in counseling and in ministry, some people want to hold on to their pain because it's all they've known. And sometimes people can feel a little lost because I don't know who I am without this. I don't know who I am without my anger. I don't know who I am without whatever it is that they're, hanging on to still. And so you wouldn't think it would be difficult, but it is sometimes difficult for people to let go of pain because pain is all they've known.
So I'm going to focus on you then. How did you process the stage between being a victim to overcoming and becoming a victor? So, because I saw purpose when we talked about you became an advocate, you are concerned about making sure that your experience is worth everybody else's hearing, and your knowledge helps them prevent or cope with similar situation. But still, you were there. You walked through that road, and now I'm talking about the strength that you had to find, because no matter what kind of support you got from the group, you had to expose yourself. Okay, I'm here. I'm burning the bridge. I'm not going back anymore. It's going to be from here on. So, what was that process? How long did it take? Were you ready to go when you first saw the nurse, or was that a process that you started to build up? How much of the support from your family, and I know your faith, when did all of those combined took place, or if it was one after the other? I'm more intrigued now who you were and who you became, in that period in between.
Excellent, insightful question. And, for me, I am really grateful that I had all of the right things happen for me. I really did. And I don't take that for granted. And by that, I mean, I was able to eventually tell. I was believed when I told my sister. I went to Children's Advocacy Center to receive victim services and court preparation. And in that year, that was helpful. That counseling was very helpful. I had support from my own family. Okay. Right now, sometimes it ends with the first thing I mentioned. Some people don't get any of that, right? And so these are the people that I'm trying to help. So when we look at the fact that all the right things happened for me in that sense, it was about a year after I had disclosed that the Dallas Morning News asked to do an interview with me as a teenager. So I'm a teenager and I'm still very much healing. At this point, I can barely make eye contact with anyone. You've seen the look. My shoulders are slumped over. I have a lot of shame, a lot of oppression. I can barely carry on a conversation. I can barely look someone in the eye, just broken, a broken spirit and a broken heart, right? And the betrayal was so deep and the pain is so deep. And the thing is that one pivotal moment happened with this Dallas Morning News interviewer. So this was days after the perpetrator was sentenced to prison. And the reason I think why the Dallas Morning News reached out is because it happened at a private Christian school. And this is what's funny about the media. This is what's funny about the news or people in general. They think, oh, wow, I can't believe it could happen at a private Christian school. I can't believe it could happen at a Christian camp. I can't believe this could happen in an environment like that. And actually, if you look at the way predators look, it's the perfect place for it to happen, right? We've talked about how predators look for opportunities to be around children. So the news was like, hey, we're going to reach out. So I agreed to do the interview, and my parents supported me. And this is why support is so important, because they said, if you do the interview, we support you. If you do not want to do the interview, we support you as well, whatever you choose. So I agreed to do it, and I'm 17 years old at the time. And I answer his questions respectfully. And the very last thing, this is what happened. He's leaving the house. He's saying goodbye. We're walking him out in the foyer of our home. And he turns to me and he says, oh, and don't worry, Jenna, we won't put your name in the paper. And I had this supernatural boldness that came from someplace else that really overcame me. And I stood up straight and I squared my shoulders and I looked up at this man and I shouted, no. I told him, I said, no. And he looked at me perplexed, and he looked at my parents, and I said, no, you can't do that. And I said, because the last question he asked me in the interview was, what would your message be to other survivors? And I said, tell someone, but don't just tell anyone, tell someone that's going to get you resources and support and help, right? Because that's what you deserve. Because sometimes people will tell and there's no further action taken, right? For them to receive the healing that they need. And so that was my message to embolden other survivors. And so I said, how can I ask other survivors to report and to be brave and to have the courage to say something if I'm too ashamed to even publish my name?
So you're already thinking back then, not necessarily your personal situation. You're thinking, I want other people to hear me out and not be ashamed or hesitate to put their name out there if they are in that situation. You got to let it out. So you had that foreseen at the moment? Or you just did that on impulse?
It was, honestly, it was 100% impulse because it felt wrong to me to have my name hidden. And at the time, I didn't understand why I reacted that way. Even my parents were like, who is this? Because I was very soft-spoken and very, very still much healing at the time. So for me to raise up and shout at the man no was a very odd thing for me to do at the time. But I know now what I was doing is I was challenging the stereotypes of shame. Because most victims don't want their names identified. And there's legitimate reasons for that, of course. Right. But I was so tired of silence. I was so tired of shame. I was so tired of, the process, the victim process, that I had enough. And he said, well, I'm going to have to get special attention. I'm going to have to get special. I'm going to have to bring this because you're a minor in Texas at the age of 17. We don't publish the names of minors. Do your parents consent? We have to get with the news and make sure they consent. But all in all, they ended up publishing my name. And I had no idea at the time when I was 17 years old that would spark a real interest for people to want to learn and hear from someone that is willing to be real, vulnerable, and transparent about their experience.
Would you say then that critical moment became in the beginning of your advocacy? Because I think with that article probably got catapulted to a scale that you didn't maybe even think of it, but now the attention is on you. And is that how it started?
That's exactly how it started. I had no idea it would be a catalyst and it would pave the way for me to have a voice in other areas. So a year later, Glamour magazine did their largest article on this topic that they had ever done before. Wow. And I had no idea that that's what I was going to do. But at the time, it was just an impulse and it felt wrong I was challenging the shame that came along with, and the media still does it. The media was still, unfortunately, reinforced stereotypes of shame for different victims. Yeah. And not everybody has to publish their name either. It's not for everyone. This has just been the path that I've been on, and like I said, it's been 100% organic. I never set out with intentionality and said that everyone needs to know my story and everyone needs to know what happened to me. But God has a sense of humor.
I know. They say God has this way. No matter many roads take turns, you always. We're going to have a quick break and we're going to go for our final chapter after this. How does that sound?
Great.
Okay. So it has been a great journey so far that you're gracious to share a lot of the things. It's very inspiring to see your example, victor or not victim, the advocacy. You have a nonprofit, I believe, Reveal to Heal. I'd like to hear a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. For me, I received counseling services, victim services through a children's advocacy center. And because a lot of what I experienced happened in the faith environment, I learned that the last layer of healing for me, and really where I received the most breakthrough in every area of my life, was when I addressed the spiritual impact of trauma. So, a lot of mental health research focuses on how trauma can affect the mind, trauma affects the body, the brain. But actually, the first person who told us that trauma affects the spirit and the body and the mind is actually in God's word. So, if you go back and you read the text, it's very clear, and it shows that as the spirit of a person goes, so goes the rest of their body. So in that, we look at identifying a crushed spirit. And so when you look at research, actually secular research does show that there is a significant spiritual impact when someone has suffered specifically any type of abuse. So for example, in one research study, they found there was about 527 abuse victims, and they found a statistically significant spiritual injury. And these injuries included feelings of guilt, anger, grief, doubt, and belief that God is unfair. And so these are real concepts that I think everyone can identify with if you've been through any type of trauma. And so we have these questions and we say, why, God? Why? And what I learned is that the question is not really in the why. The question is in the pain. The problem is the pain. It's not the why or the answer. The problem was the pain, because it's what's next? What now? What do I do with the trauma now? What do I do with these effects now? And so we look at identifying a crushed spirit. And actually, if you look at the wisest man that ever lived, if you look at Solomon, and if you look at the Proverbs actually connect, and they look, and you can see causation of a perverse person is the direct causation for a crushed spirit. When we look at Proverbs, it says a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. And you can do a lot of perverse things with that muscle, right? And we go very deep into understanding the impact psychologically and spiritually. And when I identified these types of things, wow, my inner person became stronger. And myself, my power and how I believed God saw me was different. My confidence before God, my conscience before God was much stronger. And so, we teach survivors that they can go to the throne of grace, not the throne of judgment, because so many survivors think that God is angry at them or they've done something wrong. I never met a survivor that didn't, assume a false responsibility of guilt and have blame and shame and fear. And all of these things are the devil's tactics. All of these things are enemy territory, right? A predator, silence and shame are a predator's best friend. Well, we connect that, and that translates spiritually as well too. That's the devil's playing ground as well spiritually, to try to keep you blocked spiritually, right? So we talk about that crisis of faith, and people find a lot of freedom. So they come through our program for freedom, for true freedom spiritually. And then when you get that freedom spiritually, well, then you start to see the effects in the body and in the soul as well, because it is possible to have a physical injury, but your spirit remains uncrushed, right? So we look at the scriptures that say, a crushed spirit is difficult to bear. Who can bear a crushed spirit? And the answer is no one. No one can bear a crushed spirit, and a crushed spirit is very difficult to recover from.
Yeah. This is like for me, I look at the image of an onion with all the layers. You're not going to have full healing or redemption unless you get to the core. So the body, pretty much, whatever degree of abuse it was a victim of, is not the core. It's just the manifestation of the core. And I guess the spiritual component is the only way you can actually dig that deep.
Yes.
That's what I meant to say.
Yes.
And for me, there are two words that come to mind: transcend and transmute. You literally, you transform the energy of something negative into something positive. Now that you got that deep, now you can deliver to the world.
Yes.
the best version of yourself.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy?
It's very powerful when you actually think about, God designed us for survival.
Mm-hmm.
Our bodies are built to survive.
Yeah.
And to cope and to manage.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's getting into that inner man, that inner woman, that inner person, the core of who you are, and, allowing God's power and his light to heal you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is possible. And this is the good news. This is not a fun topic. It's not a popular topic, but the way I'm able to do this is because I'm looking at this now from a perspective of light. I don't see it from my own darkness anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I've conquered darkness. I know the one who has power over darkness. And so when I look at this, I can look at this from the lens of hope,
Mm-hmm.
and the light shines in the darkness and the darkness doesn't overcome it. And so God will not be mocked and the devil does not get to win.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news is that for me, I don't share anything that I haven't myself personally experienced. And so for me, I know what it's like to go from a crushed spirit, suicidal, not having the answer, not seeing the light, to now then being transformed, since you mentioned transformation into a spirit of might.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about the end goal is to have a spirit of might,
Mm-hmm.
an overcoming spirit, right? Apostle Paul said, we are more than conquerors. It means you reign victorious over your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It means you reign victorious. And it is possible. It is possible. And I think that's what people really need to know when they look at the different adverse effects that they've had in their lives and the different traumas, because we all have traumas.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has something, type of adversity that they have had to overcome. But when you look at the fact that there is hope and that there's always hope, and for me, I know that God makes all things new.
Yeah.
And he's not exaggerating. God does not exaggerate. New means you're a new creation. And when people hear my story and they hear what I've been through, I've had many people say, they're looking at me now today and they're like, it's hard to believe you've been through what you say you've been through. Or it's hard to believe that you've experienced these types of things, And I always say that's the ultimate goal of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is that I don't look the same. I don't act the same. I don't talk the same. I'm a new person because I'm healed. And this is the goal for everyone. And this is the burden that I have for all survivors, is that everyone's able to get to a place where they don't only survive, they can thrive and they can overcome.
That's awesome. That brings me to your book over here. Hold on. You said something, though, that I always share with you, the belief. Darkness in itself is an illusion. The definition is absence of light. Yeah. So when you find light, you dissipate darkness. So, pure in heart. Okay, so now this is a testament and a testimonial at the same time. What would you like the readers to experience by reading your story? Whatever you described. And another thing here too that I was able to gather is you didn't focus on the negative and how bad the experience was. It was more on the process and the journey in the healing that took place. So you had a positive outlook, despite the fact you were narrating such a painful part of your life.
Yes, and that's exactly right. This book is extremely inspirational, and details are not fun, right? Yeah. So I don't talk about details. I talk about more of this is how something can happen. This is the situation. This was the grooming. And it's very educational. I have the warning signs in there that I mentioned, and resources for help as well. And, all in all, my best feedback has actually been from other survivors that have said, I haven't always been able to articulate or express how this has affected me, but I found that in your book. And so there's solidarity in there where they can say, you know what, I'm not alone. And this is what I'm able to overcome too. And so it's extremely inspirational and educational as well. And it's not intended for any triggers or anything like that. Right. It's intended to help heal.
To be a victor, not a victim.
That's exactly right.
Hold on a second here. Look at the cover, guys. Pay attention. Pure in Heart by Jenna Quinn. Now, you talked a bit about the nonprofit, and I just want to elaborate a little bit more, like what kind of work they do. You said about, you promote the educational part. You have the Jenna Law component, which becomes something that the states now across the land are incorporating, which is to prevent such a thing from happening by equipping the teachers, hopefully the parents,
Yeah.
and the kids of age to understand what they should look out for and not hesitate to act on it if they see any of the warning signs. So, how does the nonprofit ties up with everything, and how active are you with it? Because that's the other thing we kind of missed out in the beginning. You are all over making engagements. You go to TED Talk, you go to speaking engagements. What's your life like? I assume this is a full time job for you at this point. Your so can you elaborate how everything ties up? If your nonprofit is part of what you do also on a day to day.
Yes. So a big component is the training aspect. So there are different types of groups that I train through Jenna's Law. And so some of that is through the nonprofit as well. And so there's law enforcement, mandatory reporters. I'll be training about 5,000 law enforcement members next month at the Crimes Against Children conference, actually here in Dallas. It's one of the largest child protection conferences in the whole world. There's people from other countries walking around speaking different languages, coming to learn about protecting children. So it's a really amazing conference. So I'll be training there for different continuing education hours. Law enforcement can get their TCOL hours, and mental health can get their CEs as well. And so there's a whole, professional environment to train. But then there's also students. I love being able to train the student body as well. So you look at, going into a gym school assembly style, and you look at middle schoolers and you look at high schoolers, and you would be so shocked, Carlos. They are so hungry to learn about how they can keep themselves safe. Mm-hmm. You can hear a pin drop in there. And it's almost as if there's in the atmosphere a sense of relief that I'm so grateful someone is coming into this school that cares about me enough, that loves me enough to educate me and to warn me on how I can keep myself safe. Mm. And so I've had a lot of young girls. I've seen intervention right there in real time. When I go through the online grooming indicators, I've had young girls right then and there. They come up afterwards to visit, and they're like, "Oh, this guy." 2 different situations, 2 different girls, 2 different social media apps. And they're like, "Oh, well, he's shown an interest here. He's told me these things. He's asked for this." And I said, "Okay, so what are we going to do about it now?" And so I give them steps, right? Ignore, stay, block, report. And so I give them the steps that they need to take in person and online. And so those situations, that grooming was now, intervened. There was intervention because they sat through a Jenna's Law training. And so our young people are more at risk than ever before because of online components. And so what research shows is that 1 in 5 youth that regularly use the internet have already interacted with a predator without knowing it. Mm. Because if you're a predator, you have multiple profiles and you can be online at multiple times. Wow. And if you're blocked here, you just go on to the next. Yeah. Right? So there's millions of children online. And so it's a bigger breeding ground. It's in this giant crime scene that we can't afford not to train our children and youth anymore. So there's a component for training the youth as well, which I really enjoy because of the authenticity of, the youth. And so there's the training component there for the prevention and for Jenna's Law. And the good news is that research shows that after a Jenna's Law training, educators are about 4 times more likely to report versus their pre-training careers. So we know that it's working. Wow. And the intervention is happening. And then the other component then is the restorative care, which I was telling you a little bit about through our program that we have for survivors.
Unbelievable. That's amazing. I think that right there Wow. Wow. What a journey. Um, if people need to know more about your work or they need to reach out, we're gonna put all the data there. But is there anywhere in particular they should go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have, they can visit the website
Mhm.
and put in there, what their area of interest is and what they're looking for. And if I don't have it, I will get you the resource that you
Okay.
need. I'm always connecting to different resources depending on where they are located in the country. And so, yeah, please do reach out and let us know how we can help you.
You got it. Thank you so much, Jenna. It was a pleasure to share the time with you. And I'm just amazed with the impact that you have caused from your experience and your journey. Thank you so much for doing what you do. And I'm honored to have you with the Coffee Time with Carlos Machado.
Thank you.